Welcome to the product demonstration video of the kick and bass machine. My name is A-lusion, and you might have seen some earlier work of me in the form of the Screech Designer, the Hardstyle and the Hardcore Kick Configurator, or any of the sample packs. Or you might have heard my music in the past 15 years as A-lusion or Second Identity, or experienced a DJ set. This time I'm bringing you something which I've been working on for the past few months called the kick and bass machine. So let's check it out. There it is. The kick and bass machine. Well, the kick and bass machine is a Kontakt full edition instrument that is specifically made for the kick and the bass related hard dance genres. Think of hardstyle, raw style, hardcore, UK hardcore. If it has a kick and a bass and it's tend to be a little bit harder, then this is the instrument for you. So before we go into the details and check out all of its features, let's zoom in a little bit on what it can do. Let's play around. I'm going to play around with the shuffle mode. Let's hear some examples. Now you have an idea of what it can do. It's time to dig a little deeper and talk more about the concept. The concept of the kick and bass machine is that any kick and bass combination obviously holds a kick and a bass, but it holds also maybe some hidden layers, and this machine has all the different layers together and you can blend them all into one nice kick and bass machine. The cool thing about doing this in a Kontakt sampler is that it can be any BPM or it can be any pitch. So there's no limitation to any tuning or any pitch or any BPM you want to work in. And this makes it highly suitable to work with the kick and the bass for the hardstyle, the raw style, the UK hardcore, the hardcore, because all of those have a slightly different BPM, of course. Well, the concept of a kick and bass is obviously that it has a kick and a bass line. Well, the kick usually is a kick drum sound, which is used in any EDM genre, any dance genre, specifically around between 60 and 100 hertz. Well, let's say 80 hertz by default, sometimes a bit up, sometimes a bit down. And the bass line has its fundamental at a bass note varying from like E or F, like 43 hertz to, let's say, 50, 60 hertz, like an octave up. And around that, a lot of stuff can happen. You can add like an attack sound. You can add like an additional bass line. You can give the bass line a certain movement. And that is basically the concept of this kick and bass machine. As you can see in the layout, there are several layers, several features, several general features. There's a nice sphere in the middle. There's a shuffle mode. I'm going to zoom in on all the different elements, but before we go there, let's talk about the layers first. So let's talk about the layers. Well, on the top left, we start with the kick drum layer. The next one is the bassline layer over there. And the complete middle section is filled up for the extra basslines section. On the bottom left, we have the sub bass and an additional attack. And 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 2 extra bass layers. 5, 6 layers are available to shape your sound, to shape your kick and bass. On the bottom right, we have an effects section. In the bottom itself, we have a shuffle mode. And on the top right, we have a style selector. More on that later on. Let's start with the kick layer. Well, the kick layer, let's first solo the kick layer. So we're going to remove mute all of the other layers. Let's play it. There it is. This is a nice generic kick drum which is suitable for a lot of different kick and bass styles. And there's a volume control, there's a pitch control. You can change the kick drum here. There's 20 different kick drums, and you can load up 10 kick drums of your own. There's a phase invert knob, specifically comes in handy when layering the bass, of course, when layering sounds. There's a low pass filter, high pass, EQ gain, which is off by default. We can set the frequency, let's say, to 200 Hertz, bandwidth all the way wide. Let's see what happens. Small, wide. So that's it. There's some saturation. There's an attack mode and a decay. So let's play around with the second layer. The second layer is in fact the reverse bass layer or the bass layer. There are several layers in there. Let's play around. Similar to the kick layer, you can independently set the volume, pitch, phase invert, low pass, high pass, EQ, etc., etc. Similar to the kick, also some saturation, attack decay, and this layer has in fact an additional control in the form of a bit crusher, to give it some high end or do some crazy effects with it. And there's like a sample start and a speed. The speed you might have seen earlier in the kick configurator plugins. It's basically a time stretching tool which allows the bassline to be more in a triplet rhythm or more in a straight rhythm. And the sample start can also be used for that, but that specifically can be used to quickly choose a different style to change the BPM. So the kick and bass machine by default is created on 150 BPM because of my love for the hardstyle music. But there's more. There's raw style, UK hardcore, hardcore. Of course, BPM and style are not specifically matched together, but it's just to give you an idea of what you can do. Obviously, you can do 190 BPM or 161, whatever you want. Just change the starting time. And the interesting part is that you can also do this in a sync mode, but I'm doing a separate video on that, a separate section on that. So yeah, the bass line, let's play it with the kick involved. Do some triplet. That. Okay, up to the next layer. So let's progress to the third and the fourth layer actually, the extra basslines layer. And this is where the interesting part comes up. This is what makes the kick and bass machine even more unique, because all of the other layers are focused around layering everything together. And this layer is focused on generating a new type of bassline sound. Whether it's a reverse bass or a psy kind of bassline, you can do this with this layer. The sources are actually 25 different wavetable layers. And those wavetable layers are basically bass layers which I created for usage in this instrument. And the two layers can be loaded individually from each other with volume, pitch, and also panning control, which makes it really interesting to pan one of the layers on the left and the other one on the right. Well, the heart of this layer is actually focused around that wavetable layer structure. There's a feature in the middle which you can use to scrub through the audio. Let's have a quick listen. That's it. And the more you put on it, the more distortion or whatever you put on it, the more interesting this gets. And every layer has its unique character. More on that later on in a more detailed section of this demonstration video. Right now I'm going to guide you through the other features in this layer very quickly. There's a filter section over here with a cutoff. It's a low-pass filter with a resonance, attack time, and decay time. We have an amplifier section with an attack, decay, hold, and release function. High-pass filter, bit crusher, noise oscillator to give it some subtle noise. An EQ section. On the top right of the middle section, we have a strong distortion section. There's distortion in here. There's even more distortion and more distortion. There's a volume control because of all of the distortion. The layer might get a little bit loud, so you can turn it all the way down. And there's the most interesting part of this section as well, and that's the shape display, which is derived from the Screech Designer again. And the shape display can really shape your bassline sound, specifically in combination with a bassline layer from layer 2. On the bottom left of the layers, we have a pitch function, which you can use to make interesting pitch effects. Obviously, you need to use this with caution because you need to trust your ears a bit and listen with your ears to get it in the right pitch, but it provides interesting results. We have a filter LFO to get nice movement in the bass line, and we have a pitch LFO when we click the toggle. So this is in short what this layer has in store. Like I said, in a later section, in a later video, you can hear this in a more detailed version when I play around with it. Let's go on to the next layer. Let's talk about the sublayer. Obviously, the bassline layer and the extra basslines layer do have subfrequencies. However, we can filter those out and use a clean sub-bass layer instead. It might produce some really professional, strong results. There is a sub-straight, triplet straight, gated, and a sine straight sub sound. And let's just play around some of those layers to give you an idea on how they sound. Like that. Triplet. Let's check out a gated one. Just to give you an idea on what you can do with this. There is a volume control. There is a pitch control. Very important in this one, there is a phase invert control. There is a speed control, which is basically the time stretching tool again. And there is a cut bass frequency. I advise you to enable that switch to cut the bass of the bass lines altogether and have the sub of the sub-bass layer play solo. If you turn it all down, you can see that the high-pass filters is all the way turned to the left, and if you enable it, you see that the high-pass filters are turned a little bit up, which removes the sub-frequencies of those layers and make room for the sub-bass layer to play solo. Yes. So let's talk about the last layer, the attack layer. Well, not only attack, this layer holds several types of sounds, like a little ticking sound, like a little head sound, but also some different types of attacks for more raw, hardcore, or hardstyle type of attacks. Let's listen to some examples. A nice hi-hat, punchy, another punchy, a nice hardstyle kick attack, a little bit more raw, really aggressive raw attack. And you can use those if you feel the need to use those on top of your kick to get a more interesting kick and bass sound, if that is your style. So let's talk about pitch shifting for a while. Well, I can be fairly brief about that because the pitch shifting is actually done by the Kontakt instrument itself. So just hit the right key and the bassline layers will automatically adapt to the right pitch. The kick will remain steady, so let me play some examples for you. G sharp, C sharp, F sharp, F, and E. It's as simple as that. Just hit the right key in your MIDI editor, in your DAW, and the instrument will do the work for you. So, the style selector, all the way on the top right of the instrument. Like I said in the introduction, this instrument is suitable for any BPM, any hard dance related BPM. So let's not go to 80 or 90 or 100 BPM. I'm talking 140 BPM and up. Well, how does this work? Well, obviously, Kontakt, the main engine of the instrument, can do the time stretching. However, for the sake of quality, I decided to take a different route, not use the internal time stretching, pitch shifting, time stretching algorithm for the bassline sound. And I decided to work with a sample start time. Well, what I coded in this is that you can sort of sync the starting time. It's predefined by me based on your BPM. So let's start with 150 BPM. Okay, let's change it to, let's take the roughest example, to 180. What I did now is when I change it to 180 and we click sync, see what happens with the start time. It changes the sample start. So any of the layers in here, any of those bassline layers have a different start time now. And if I play it now, see, 180. Let's go to 160 and do the same thing. Hit sync. There we are again. And there's an additional drop down here which says straight and triplet. Let's change it back to 150 BPM for the example. 150 BPM, and let's go for triplet. And now the speed and the starting time both get changed. And now we're in a triplet rhythm. That's all I can tell about the style selector. It's a convenient tool for setting up the instrument. Obviously, you can also do it all manually, but this is just to help you out and get you started when you work on a different BPM as 150 BPM. Now, let's do some magic on creating a new type of bassline. We're going to use the extra basslines layer, and we're going to use, I've just picked wavetable number 17 and number 12, and let's play around with it to hear what it sounds like by default. Scrub a little bit. Okay. Let's add a kick. It doesn't sound like a proper bass line just yet, so let's increase the attack time a bit and lower the hold. Okay, add some decay. It starts to roll nicely now, so that's good. Maybe we should enable this up, right? Like that. Add some bit crushing. Maybe add the noise. Yeah, good. Change the EQ a bit. Okay. And let's spice it up a little bit by adding some distortion. Scrub a little bit. Yeah. And now let's do some shaping with the shape tool. Let's enable it. Let's just go for the first one just yet. Let's try some shaping again, some scrubbing again. And let's go all in. Obviously that's all too much, but you get the idea. And okay, this is cool. We can play around with the amplifier envelope, we can play around with the filtering, we can play around with the EQing, we can do some serious damage. We can also use the roar function. It's like making like this DJ outro set loop. It's a very quick loop. It can produce some interesting results. You gotta watch the pitch. And let's check out an important feature in terms of the LFO to give it some nice movement. Play around with the phase. Now I just enabled the LFO on the cutoff, and there are several shaping tools for shaping the LFO. There's a sine, sawtooth, and a rectangle square, and that provides like this really glitchy type of bassline, which really works well under a Psy type of bassline. In order for that to work really nice, we can lower the amplifier envelope again and increase the hold. So let's listen to how that sounds. This is nice. And obviously when we start layering all the other sounds, it can become really interesting. So this is a really quick tour of what you can do with the additional bassline layer. It works really well in just having the kick and the extra bassline layers. It works really well on top of a regular bassline sound source, even just with the sub bass. There's unlimited potential in using this layer. And this just gives you a little bit of insight on how you can use it. So let's check out one of the most interesting parts of the kick and bass machine, the shuffle mode. All the way on the bottom we see a dice, we see a back button, and we see the layers over here. And what it basically does is every time you roll the dice, all the shuffle eligible layers will randomly change in one of the other layers. So let's test it out with all of the layers enabled. Yeah. This is basically what it does, and you can enable and disable every layer to be eligible for shuffle mode. So if you're like, okay, I like that gated kick, so let's keep the sub bass. Let's also keep the kick. But anything else can change. So let's try again. Obviously, the way I do it now is a bit too much, but you get the idea that the closer you get to your desired result, you can play around with having just one of the layers as shuffle mode or two and see what interesting results this can bring. And like I said, there's another feature, there's like the undo feature. So what if you play around and you were like, oh, I need to have the other one. There it is again. You can only do this once, so yeah, so check it out, the shuffle mode. So if you're feeling lucky, just hit the dice and see what happens. Now let's talk about automation. A very cool feature within Kontakt is obviously that you can, or within DAWs in general, is that you can automate knobs. Every knob you see here which is eligible, or every switch which is eligible for automation, can be automated and is pre-automated in your host. All the way on the left, you can see this here. And what this basically does is it allows you to twist any of the knobs. Let's give an example. I've made a pre-automation example in this instance of the instrument. Let's go over there and let's play around with this. Let's like that. See, a lot of stuff is going on. The cool thing about this is that you can be creative. You can twist the knobs, enable layers, disable layers. You can even hit the shuffle dice through automation, so you can randomly just generate a track or whatever. So the options are limitless. I mean, especially for the automation part, it is really nice to use the shape function and to gradually change the knob over time, which allows the sound to grow, to change. And I'm sure this is what triggers hopefully a lot of producers in being more creative. And this is what also makes this instrument suitable for the more advanced producers. So go all in with the automation effects available. So another cool thing which is built in are in fact the built-in master effects. Most of them are master effects as they work on every layer. Some of them are layer specific, and I will explain you more on that in this part of the video. So there is two types of effects menus. There's the first one which has saturation, lo-fi, delay and reverb. And if you click the toggle on the top left, you can see another high-pass filter for the complete signal, resonance. There's a bandpass filter with the resonance. There's a width control, and there is a gain control. The gain control is really nice in combination with the limiter, which is on there. And there is an overall distortion feature. And all of those effects can be used, obviously, on the full kick and bass sound, with the exception of the delay and reverb. Those only work on the bassline sounds. So let's check out some of the features. Saturation, lo-fi, delay with different timing, reverb, doing pre-delay, like that. Let's go to effects menu number 2, high pass for the complete signal. With the exception, that's important, with the exception of the send effects, the delay and reverb, resonance. There's a bandpass filter, also with the exception of the send effects in terms of the delay and reverb. So if you want to do a full bandpass, you can best do that in your DAW itself. This is just for convenient use and for some cool automation. Width, really mono, really stereo, and there's a gain that works before the limiter. Additional distortion. Works really well on specific kick and bass combinations, and you can use it with caution, you can use it in extreme, whatever you like. This is just a quick demo of the effects section. Let's go on to the next. Okay, so let's talk about some of the general features within the instrument. First of all, on the layers on the top right of each layer, you see a reset kind of button. It is in fact a reset button, and what it basically does is, like you would expect, it resets the layer, but it specifically resets the knobs, the parameters that actually change the sound. So for instance, if you have the kick layer with a lot of EQ, with a lot of saturation, attack and decay, sounds a bit strange now. And if you want to reset it, just hit the reset button. Works on every layer, specifically comes in handy for the extra basslines layer, in which you can go all the way, of course. So it's just added for your convenience and your better workflow. In the bottom middle of the plugin, and I'm sure you have noticed it so far, is the nice looking sphere. The sphere is like the heart of the kick and bass machine, and as some of my followers might know, I'm fond of this type of style, so I included it, so it's kind of like an A-lusion thing. But if it's not your thing, just disable it, and if you enable the shape mode, you get some nice looking additional colors going as well. There we have it. And it might say some graphic card, display, CPU, whatever, if you turn it off. I like it to be on. And like I said, you can play, obviously you can play the notes with your keyboard, and what you hear now is a constant velocity, no matter how hard I play. This is nice for when you're actually playing with the instrument and testing out different pitch shiftings, different keys. But if you're incorporating the instrument in a track, it might come in handy to use the velocity of your MIDI, of your notes, to make volume changes for a build-up or whatever, or a breakdown or an effect. You can simply do this by enabling the velocity on knob over there. So now, the velocity is in play. If you're completely fed up with the style you're looking at, you can simply change the skin to something else, change the background, change the vibe. And another important thing is, I'm sure you've noticed, maybe you haven't, but some of the display areas hold the values of the specific knobs, like the cutoff or the distortion or the shaping. And if I change the values over there, you see that the values are changing. And there is a way to kind of like reset the display with the reset labels function. And that kind of like resets all the text labels. There's nothing more to it. That's basically what it is. So far for the general master features. Okay, last but not least, if you're completely lost in finding your way in the instrument, just enable the info pane over here in Kontakt and hover over a button to see what it does. All the way on the bottom, you can see the information, and every element of which I thought it might be interesting for you to read something on is showing the information in the info section. For instance, you can see that shape 2 is actually a peak EQ effect, and shape 3 is an overall EQ effect with bandwidth control. So that helps, or just read the documentation which I provided with the instrument. So I hope everybody is just as excited as I was and am in making this instrument for you. It's been a lot of work, many months of coding, 6,500 lines of code, over 100 different layers crafted by me over the past few years, and specifically for this instrument. It's out there now, it's available. Go to store.lossev.com. check it out. There's other products as well, such as the kick configurator and the screech designer. And if you have any questions, drop me a line here in the comments of the video or through email or through the web shop. And if you are using the instrument and you made something cool, it would be really nice to hear what you come up with. So send it over. I'm interested. So enjoy it and see you next time.